Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, perhaps if you're joining us from Asia as well. This is our third webinar in our webinar series for Nature Positive Universities. I'm Henry Grubb, I'm hosting today, and our third webinar is all about actions for biodiversity on campus. Please do note that this webinar is being recorded, and we'll also now have AI translated captions if you would like to listen to or if you'd like to be able to read the captions in a different language. If you just go to the More setting and then the captions, and then you can select your language. It is AI translation, so no guarantees. Just before we get started, a little bit about Nature Positive Universities. We started in 2021 a collaboration between researchers at the University of Oxford and UNEP to try and form a race to net zero style movement, but for the higher education sector's biodiversity impact, supported by the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. We know higher education has a massive biodiversity footprint globally, and it needs to be dealt with. But our universities have unique power and influence in their communities and beyond, so can play a key role in tackling the climate and biodiversity crises. We have a 4-step pledge that commits our members to calculate their baseline impacts, set measurable targets, undertake specific actions using our refrain, reduce, restore, renew framework, and finally, publicly report progress. We also have a Student Ambassadors program to encourage students to get involved by helping us seize the urgency and push their institutions to be more ambitious, and getting involved practically with biodiversity surveys, creating new habitats, and sharing their experiences with a global network of students on campuses across the world. Today's webinar is our third in the series and all about the action we can take on our campuses to increase our on-site biodiversity. So, our hosts today, my name's Henry Grubb. I'm a PhD student at Imperial College London and an associate working with Nature Positive Universities. Then we also have Emily Stott, who's the Nature Positive Universities coordinator. Hello, Emily.
Hi, it's great to see so many people here, universities and also other sectors represented. And just a note to say, please be in touch with me or Holly if you would like your university to make the pledge or if you'd like to collaborate with us in another way.
And that leads us on to our other host, Holly Thompson, who's our Nature Positive Universities project assistant. Hello, Holly.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Henry said, my name is Holly, and I'm a project assistant working with the Nature Positive Universities team. Thank you.
So as Emily says, if you're part of a university that is already a pledged member, then we hope that this webinar provides inspiration for how to move your nature positive journey forward. We also want more universities to take the pledge and sign up, so do take a look at our website so that you know how to make a pledge, and anyone can get in touch with Holly and Emily to ask questions and follow up about the pledge or the Student Ambassador program as well. The agenda for today, we've got 2 fantastic speakers talking about biodiversity on their campuses. Our first speaker is Professor Dr. Mark van Kleunen from the University of Konstanz in Germany. He's a Professor of Ecology. And then our second speaker is Professor Shyam Sunder Jyani from Dungar College in Bikaner in Rajasthan province in India. And we'll be hearing from him second. I think that that's all I have to say. We'll have time for Q&A. Please do put your questions in the chat as we go along. Mark will speak first, and as he is giving his presentation, put any questions in the chat and I'll be able to put them to him after his presentation has finished. So without further ado, Mark, would you like to share your screen? I'll stop sharing mine. In fact, that would be helpful.
Okay, I will start sharing. Let me see. It should be this one. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep, that looks fantastic. Thanks,
Good.
Mark.
Okay, so thank you for the introduction, Henry. It is my pleasure to present to you some of the biodiversity actions that we have done at the University of Konstanz. And on the image that you see here, this aerial picture of our university, you can see that our campus is actually already surrounded by natural or semi-natural areas. We have forest areas here in the background and also some nice grassland areas. So our university is relatively young. It was founded in the 1960s, and they started building the campus in the 1970s. And probably one unique feature of our university is that the campus does not consist of buildings that are separated, but they're actually all connected to each other. So where is Konstanz? So Konstanz is a relatively small town in southern Germany, central Europe, and directly at the border with Switzerland. So we are at Lake Konstanz, in German called the Bodensee, one of the largest lakes in Europe, and we're also very close by the mountains. So we are really lovely surroundings. If we zoom in on the university, so this is our university. We saw the other picture just before. If you take the campus sensu stricto, then the actual campus area would be more or less the area that you see here, but also other parts in the surroundings we consider to be the larger university campus, although we don't have any authority over it. So the forest is managed by the forest authority, the grassland is managed by the building authorities, and so are the actual buildings on campus. But we also have actually here a limnological institute that is directly at the water. So we have also part of Lake Konstanz that we consider to be part of the larger university campus. And one thing that you can see already of this aerial picture is that here, this brown yellowish area looks almost like a mining site. That is a building site. So there's quite a bit of expansion of the university. This, of course, will be at the cost or is at the cost of nature. But that was also one of our motivations to join the Nature Positive University Network to try and compensate for some of the lost biodiversity. So I will show this slide more frequently and then also indicate where we have done already some biodiversity actions. And one of the first actions happened already before we made the pledge. It happened already in 2020. And that is what's called a green roof experiment. But this was very, I think, important for the pledge and the actions that we had later on, because it put us into contact with the building authorities and the person there responsible for ecological concerns and management of the university buildings and the fields surrounding it. So here's another aerial picture of our university. So as I mentioned already, it was built in the 1970s, with these buildings here were the first ones. And then here, the more recent ones, you can see they have already green roofs. But that started with these commercial sedum mixtures, many exotic species actually among them. They were later then also colonized by some native species. But the initial buildings, they did not have any green roofs. They just have these gravel roofs. So more recently, then they started to also green some of those areas. So this is the building that I'm actually in, the biology building, which used to be just one gravel field. And probably already 10 years ago, they first converted this part into a green roof. And that was done in collaboration with some of my colleagues who suggested to make it like a biodiversity roof, to plant multiple species, native species, to also have some structures on it like deadwood and even a small pond area. And then later, when I heard that they also wanted to do this part of the roof, I got involved in it and I suggested that we could maybe set it up as a biodiversity experiment. And they were keen to do that. So with the building authorities, we set up then here 80 plots of 2 by 2 meters, where we planted different native species adapted to relatively dry conditions and set them up as plots with either 1 species, 3 species, 6 species, or 12 species, with the idea of testing whether it is really helpful to start with a high biodiversity to increase the cover on the green roof and also to prevent the establishment of some unwanted species. And what are unwanted species? That are particularly woody species, because the facility management of our university, they don't like the woody species growing on the roof, as with the roots they might actually do some damage to it. So here you can see the layout of the experiment. Within green, the 20 plots that had only 1 species, in yellow the ones with 3 species, in blue with 6 species, and 12 with red species. So we planted them in spring 2020. And here you can see a plot where we planted just one single species, Gypsophila species, and here a plot where we had actually 12 different species planted. And then we started to follow over time how they changed in cover. Initially, we did it with a mobile phone on a selfie stick and standing on a chair and taking the picture from above. Later on, I got to know a drone pilot, and then from then on, he went with his drone every month over the plots and took aerial pictures, and then we could use some software to analyze the cover. So here you can see on the left side the roof in August 2020, so several months after we actually planted them. So you see relatively few plants, lots of gravel, and here 2 years later you see that most of it is already covered by vegetation. Here we had a master thesis project who was analyzing these drone pictures for each of the plot to calculate the area covered in each of the different treatments, and that over time. So time zero is actually the 21st of March of 2021, and then here the last one was in October of that same year. So you can see, of course, that during spring and then summer the cover increases, but you can also see already that even at the beginning here, the red dots is higher than the green dots, so the high diversity plots had a higher cover than the monoculture plots. And that effect was maintained throughout that year. So suggesting that it is indeed very useful to start with a relatively high diversity of plant species on that roof. So after we joined the Nature Positive University network, one of the first things we did, the first biodiversity actions, was to replace a monoculture of an honeysuckle, Lonicera pileata, a non-native species that is native to China and was planted here by the architects. So the architects, when they had built this building that you see in the background with the silver color, they had actually contacted some of my colleagues to discuss already what kind of plants they could plant around the buildings. And my colleagues gave them some good advice of some native species that they could plant, but they fully ignored it and decided just to plant this monoculture of this relatively sterile Lonicera species. So to make a point, one of our first actions was to remove part of this monoculture and to replace it with native plant species. So that was done in spring last year. So first, the building authorities, they helped us remove the Lonicera in part of it. In the background, you cannot see it here, but you can see it on this picture. It still actually exists. And then we had an action with people bringing in some structure into it, some dead wood. We ordered 21 native plant species from a local nursery that is working with native material. And then we had a group of students and other interested people at the university help us with the planting. So we planted it with mainly herbaceous species, but also some shrub species that you can see here. And to encourage people to help, we also organized some drinks and some food. And during one morning, we planted the entire area. So here you can see it already half a year later in autumn 2023. So the vegetation has already nicely filled up the space. Things have started flowering. And also I went out there actually yesterday. So after winter, it looks like this. Most of the plants are still there. Some of the species are flowering, Pulmonaria species. And I was actually lucky to see already that it attracts one insect. The bumblebee here was visiting it already. And what we would like to do to see what the effect is on biodiversity. I mean, the effect on plant diversity is of course obvious, but also to look at the insect diversity. One of my colleagues will go there at the end of April with a group of students as an excursion. They will sample insects in the still existing Lonicera patch, as well as in the newly planted native vegetation to see whether there is really an effect on the insect diversity. So a second thing that we did last year was to provide some bed roosting boxes. We had also thought about adding some nest boxes for birds, but they have already been distributed on campus a few years ago, so there was no immediate need to do that. So again, with the building authorities, they were so kind to buy these bed boxes for us. So we got 70 boxes. Some of them were installed in the surrounding trees on campus, and then also several were installed on the buildings. And one thing that is important at our university, maybe in Germany in general, is that when you organize something, you have to make sure that all the participants are insured. Yeah, so if you would be standing on a ladder and it would fall, then of course those people should be covered by the insurance. So therefore it is important that we always have these kind of actions as official events at our university. And then anyone who is participating will also be covered by the insurance. So here again, with some volunteers, also some student helpers, we use the fire emergencies and the balconies on the buildings to carry up these relatively heavy bed boxes and install them on the sides here of these balconies. You can see one hanging here. Also here, one of the buildings, north facing, actually facing the forest. Here on these balconies, we have something like 10 different bed boxes hanging there. We don't know yet whether they have been occupied by bats, as according to the local bat experts, it can take up to several years before the bats actually find them, but we will keep track of that in the coming years. Then another thing I would like to point out is what we call the biodiversity garden units by the leader of our botanical garden, Gregor Smits. He came up with the idea that more and more people, they have gardens, but they don't really like gardening. So what they do is usually they put some concrete there, they put some tar on it or some gravel, and there's no real green space. So he came up with a suggestion that these people that really don't like gardening, that they can buy these kind of biodiversity garden units, which are on wooden pallets. So they could in principle be relatively easily transported. And together with some colleagues in the botanical garden, he used some old waste material to construct all these nice biodiversity garden units and planted native plant species in them that would be of interest to many insects. And of course, if you would install one of those in your gardens, you could actually also use the pellet to make an overwintering space for hedgehogs. So this project is still going on. He also organized an event with some of the local authorities, so the building authorities, some people of the local gardening society, and also close to Konstanz, we have this flower island called the Mainau. The people there were also involved. Then one thing that we did a few months ago is a pond restoration. So this is our, say, main campus, but here in the forest we have our botanical garden. And at the edge of the forest, there used to be a pond, a very important area for the amphibians. But in the last years, because of the dry summers, it has dried out. And the layer of clay that more or less kept the water in cracked. So now it is leaking, and therefore also this photo was taken in January. Even though the winter was very wet, there is no water standing in there. So we wanted to restore this, and again, with the help of the building authorities, we could actually put a new clay layer in there and then fill it with water, and that is more or less the condition that it is in now. And of course, we realized that with climate change, we might have other dry summers that it could dry out and crack again. So now we will keep an eye on it. And if we see that it starts to dry out, we will fill it up again with water provided through the botanical garden buildings. And then the last action that we did, which was just 2 weeks ago, is here at the edge of the area that is a construction site. So one of my colleagues walked by there and saw this nice corner, which is southwest facing, and he thought it would be an ideal spot to create a kind of wild bee corner with soil where the bees can dig their nest, and we can add some structure there with wooden beams and some different soil types for them, and then plant some nectar and pollen producing plants. And he came up with that idea, and already 1 or 2 weeks later, we had the people together to do this. So here you see these yellow stripes that is just indicating the locations where the wooden beams should be. And that is then when they were actually installed, also adding some rocks for some more structure, different soil types, patches of sand were created. And then also we ordered some plant species that we could plant there to provide food to the insects. So again, during one morning, with the help of some volunteers, some people from the botanical garden, and also several students, we then prepared this area, planted the native species or the nectar producing species, and that is more or less how it looked like 2 weeks ago after we finished the planting. Yesterday I also walked by. It was very wet yesterday, but you can see the plants are still alive, and we hope that some of them will also start flowering this year. And also to then actually check whether it is actually successful, that there will be wild bee species there nesting. A local expert on wild bees will be asked to regularly check the area to see whether there is any progress. And the last thing that I would like to mention, which is not really a biodiversity action, but still an event that I like very much and would like to point out, is that we are organizing a nature positive photo contest. So our university is made the pledge, but I think the knowledge about this is not widespread yet within our university and also within the city of Konstanz. So we came up with the idea of organizing a photo contest where photos should be taken on the larger university campus. They can be submitted since last week and then until mid-July, and then a jury will select the 60 best photos that then will we will have 2 exhibitions. One will be downtown in the Lake Constance Nature Museum, and then later on in November the exhibition will be repeated in the University of Konstanz. So Henry also asked me to point out some of the easy things and some of the challenges, and I was thinking about it, and actually it all went very smooth, and I think it has a lot to do with having the right people with the right mindset in the right place. So I learned about the Nature Positive University network at an ecological conference in Geneva, and at that time I was still head of the biology department and was regularly in meetings with the rector's office. So I suggested then that I think it would be a very good idea if the university would also join that, and they were directly enthusiastic about that. They also put me then into contact with our sustainability officer, and with him, Hilmar Hofman, I have then been coordinating the different actions that we have done so far. And as I mentioned already, a very important player in this is also the building authorities. The person there is also very ecologically minded and has helped us a lot with actually providing also the money for buying the native plants, for buying the bed boxes, and so on. So I think that is very important. And maybe the only thing where we still need to find the right mindset or the right people would be actually the forest authorities that are responsible for the forest surrounding our university, as we would like to have part of the forest taken out of management to let nature actually do its work. And we hope that probably in the coming years we can convince the people to do that. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. I would like to thank the building authorities, the colleagues in the biology department that have been very helpful with the different actions. Also, the Bat Protection Society of Konstanz, some of the students that have been always very willing to help with the different actions, and also the student body of biology has actually been providing some money also for some of the actions that we have. Then for the green roof, the master student involved in the project and the drone pilot. And then for the photo exhibition, the Lake Constance Nature Museum. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for taking us through those different actions and showing us all those brilliant photos. It's really inspiring to see what you've done. Would you able to, we've got some questions coming in at the into the chat. Let me go back to the start. So Kieran Lawrence asks, well, they say that the story of developers ignoring advice about planting is a very familiar story. I was wondering if this is something that you have managed to tackle at the source, rather than having to make remedial works after non-natives have been planted, or is it something that's still ongoing after that incident you mentioned?
Yeah, we will have to see how it will be when the new buildings that they are building, so they're building some new lecture halls, what the vegetation will look like there. But I think we are now in much better contact with the actual building authorities. And when we had this native plant action, then also one of the directors of the building authorities actually joined. So I think they have received the message that it is very important for us that we have there a native vegetation. But yeah, the future will teach us whether they really do that.
Another question in the chat asks, so with the bare soils in the B corner at the moment, what sort of maintenance plan do you have in place for weeding that? So do you have student volunteers?
To be honest, we don't have a plan yet. So we hope first that the plants that we planted will actually survive and start flowering and also seeding themselves. And then in the next years, we will have to keep an eye on it, how it develops. But yeah, we also have the botanical garden with several gardeners, and we can always ask some help from them to help weeding out and maybe replacing some of the species that did not establish very well.
We also have another question from Christina O'Loughlin, and I was going to ask a similar sort of question to elaborate a bit more about money. Lots of the schemes that you've presented here would have cost some money. So I know you mentioned that you managed to get some funding in some places, but what were the schemes generally for how you could get money to pay for these sorts of things, and were the people providing the money keen to do it, or did you have to really persuade them?
Yeah, so many of the actions like buying these plant species and these bed boxes that has been financed by the building authorities. So they have some little chest of money specifically for ecological kind of restoration things. So there we were very lucky that they paid for that. Also for the pond area, the machinery needed to restore that clay layer that was also covered by the building authorities. So there we have been very lucky. And when we look at the list of the plant species that we planted, I think the bill was something like 2,000 to 3,000 euros. So it is still a relatively large amount of money. And then the photo contest was a call by the university where they want to have a better connection to the general public, and you could apply for money. So there we applied for about 11,000 euros to organize this, and they were happy with the project proposal that we had, so they provided that money. And then for some of the biodiversity monitoring, that is done with the help of students, and there actually the student body is financing part of that, and also the sustainability office. So far it all worked out with the money sources. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. And we have another question from Robert Faber, who asks, how did you choose the plants for the green roof experiment?
So that was actually not done by me, but by my contact person at the building authorities. And we chose native species, but species that are all kind of adapted to dry habitats, because the layer of substrate is only about 10 centimeters thick, and particularly in summer when it is hot, it can dry out very quickly. And particularly in the first years, we had actually to also water the plots to maintain it. I have stopped watering now in the hope that we will just select the species that can actually deal with these relatively extreme conditions on top of the roof.
And that actually leads me on to my final question, which was, what conditions did you need to have for fitting a green roof in the first place? What made how did you choose which roofs on the campus were going to be selected for that? But what made them appropriate or not?
Yeah, so that was also something done and decided by the building authorities, and I think that is something that they actually had to do from the Ministry of the state of Baden-Württemberg, the part of Germany that we are in. And an important thing that they have to check first is the strength of the building. So how much substrate can you actually put on the roof before actually the building could possibly collapse? So I think that is one of the reasons why they chose our building. We're still hoping that they will install some more green roofs, but currently they're also installing solar cells on all of the roofs, and that can in some cases be in conflict with the green roof, particularly if they install them more or less with very little distance between the roof and the solar cells.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for answering those questions, Mark, and thank you very much for your talk. We're going to move on now to our second speaker, Professor Shyam Sunder Jyani, an Associate Professor of Sociology at Dungar College in Bikaner in Rajasthan state in India. So, Shyam, if you would like to start sharing your screen, and then it's the same for Mark as Shyam's going through his presentation. If you have any questions, then please put them in the chat and we'll go over them at the end.
Hello. Thank you, Henry. Dear Professor Mark, dear Henry, Emily, Holly, and all fellow participants, greetings from India.
Hey, Shyam, your screen's not sharing yet. If you could just...
Yeah, give me a few seconds, please.
Of course.
Thank you. It's loading now. I think there is a little bit technical glitch.
Oh, I think it's just coming.
Yeah. Now.
There we go. We can see it. Fantastic. I had confidence this would work. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Please, Shyam, take it away.
Thank you. As an academics, researcher, or students, we often discuss about the state of biodiversity in our society, but we rarely delve into the state of biodiversity in our own educational campuses. So the topic of discussion, action for biodiversity on campus, is serves as a call for action for all of us to take steps towards the conservation of biodiversity in our educational institution. As a student of sociology, I see a direct link between educational institutions, campus, and community at large. We are both member of the university as well as community. So our actions towards the biodiversity conservation in our educational campuses influences our action into community. So our journey is all about how to simultaneously engage university as well as community in green action. And my journey starts in 2003 when I was transferred in my present posting place, that is Government Dungar College, Bikaner, Rajasthan. And when I encountered with a problem that was dying state of some neem trees, I approached to the administration and requested them to restore all this. And unfortunately, when I received a kind of apathetic response from the authority, then I decided to engage my students and start rescuing of all these trees at my personal level. After simultaneously, I started visiting to the communities get to know what they think and what their point of view regarding their surrounding and environmental conservations. And I came to know that although people were worshipping the natural objects like sun, forest, water bodies, but I found the lack of ecological understanding or ecological sense in their act. So the same thing that I found in a policy gap, because there were a lot of good policies. Still, there are a lot of policies that encourage communities to come forward for the betterment of their ecosystem, but people are lethargic and apathetic because of the lack of understanding about the ecological value of their surroundings. So therefore, I decided to contribute in this field, and being a student of sociology, I formulated the idea of familial forestry that relates communities and families with greenery. So in familial forestry concept, we are trying to bring nature into our houses so that a process of a kind of a green socialization could be started at family level, because when we plant a sapling and treat it as a green member, then actually we start developing a bond of relationship with trees. And gradually, when such trees attract biodiversity in a form of pollinators or birds, then actually it makes sense. So this is familial forestry, and in coming slides, I'm going to share how familial forestry works when we say trees are our green members. So here are some slides through which you will see that how these green members work as a kind of societal engagement and as a kind of green socialization. So in these slides, you will see that how people are treating their trees and their all kind of vegetations with an emotional attachment and with a kind of relations, whether they are related with trees in economic sense or in a cultural sense. So here are the pictures from various familial forestry actions in which you can see that how people treat their trees as green members. These are various activities, whether there is a wedding ceremony or there is a kind of any other kind of social gathering. Every time people try to connect their activities with planting and conserving their nature, with folk songs, folk tales, and other cultural behavior. So all these activities are basically a kind of green socialization at home. And when we discuss how to bring this socialization into the realm of educational institutions, then we talk about institutional forest. Institutional forest is a kind of an extension of familial forestry from home to the institutions, because we see that institutions are very well connected with communities. So when students who experience a sense of green attachment in their homes, and when they come into schools and colleges, then it's easy to engage them into the activities. In India, here a common practice to do plantation in educational institution is just to go for boundary plantation or plantation along the roadsides. But in my view, it's not helpful as far as the habitat restoration is concerned, because when we go for a dedicated plantation drive and to develop a particular cluster of trees in our educational institutions, then actually we restore the habitat by creating a micro ecosystem. So in institutional forest, we try to develop micro ecosystem in educational institutions, so that at one extent we could restore our biodiversity, which every day is impacted by our actions in our educational institutions. So we started this from our own government Dungar College campus, where we have a large institutional forest having more than 3,000 trees of different native species, and also one public nursery. And then we replicated the idea into nearby areas, particularly in government schools and other government premises, as well as on public lands. So in these institutional forests, there are a lot of wildlife species which have started retrieved, and also we are not only merely working on trees, but we are trying to conserve and increase the varieties of grasslands that you can see in this slide, as well as we are trying to grow more and more fruit trees, because fruit trees are important for the conservation and enrichment of the biodiversity. So here are all pictures from our institutional forest. Some are from our own college campus, and other are from other schools and some other colleges, where we started working in 2003 on the idea of institutional forest, and in the last 10 years, we have grown around 200 institutional forests. So mostly pictures are from those educational institutions. Some are from other public places. These pictures are from our public nurseries, and we are operating all these public nurseries under these trees, where we grow saplings and then distribute free of cost to the students as well as to community, and also use these saplings to develop another institutional forest. Mostly saplings are from native species, particularly the fruit-bearing trees. And you can see that there are a lot of engagement of students as well as community members in growing of these saplings. What impact when we start developing such institutional forests? This can be seen in coming slides, where you will see the state of biodiversity that we are having in our institutional forests. All pictures are from our institutional forest, mainly from our college campus, and some from other institutional forests, where you will see various type of faunal diversity, as well as some kind of mammals like deer, which is a state animal of Rajasthan. So these are the pictures of various wildlife that now we can see in our institutional forest. Earlier it was not there. So our work is a kind of a pictorial journey of familial forestry intervention, through which we can, how we can make a difference. So these nest in the first one slide, these are native birds. Earlier they were not in our campus, but now we can see them because of now they are feeling safe in our campus, and they are having a balanced state of habitats. Therefore, they have started returning to the campus. Now, when we associate community with campus, then what happens? When we associate community with campus, then actually a mass green revolution starts taking shape. And it can be seen in these slides, where you will see a large number of participants in familial forestry activities with a lot of enthusiasm. Pictures are from our institutional forest, as well as from villages where we go as a member of our institute to make people aware and to give them saplings that we raise in our public nursery at our college campus. So this is all about extension of familial forestry from campus to community. So it's a kind of circle, started from home, then campus, and then larger community. So this is our drive, and this is a human formation. The word is Ram Rung Abhiyan, a green drive to inculcate the cultural sense of Lord Ram, which is really significant as far as folk culture is concerned. This is another human formation where we are advocating for some slogans. One is United for Land. That is an initiative taken by United Nations Convention to combat desertification. Another is Familial Forestry, and last one is Eco-Jasnati, means a community that is dedicated towards the conservation of the ecosystem. And all this is happening consistently since 2006, when I formulated the idea of familial forestry after working 3 years to know how to start a sociological intervention for the betterment of our surroundings. In our familial forestry activity, we discuss about our local ecosystem, and then we discuss what local actions are important. So we exclusively go with local environment because local understanding is important, and it can easily, I think that it's a workable solution. When we discuss about local aspects of climate change, then we can easily make people aware about their surrounding and make them prepared to take steps for the betterment of their surrounding. So this is all about that. A large number of students, youth, as well as older people who have retired from their agricultural job, now they are working as familial forestry activists, not only by taking action on ground, but by telling stories to their young world, how surrounding is important and how the state of biodiversity were there when they were in their age. So it's also a kind of green socialization. The another segment or another aspect of familial forestry is agroforestry, where we talk about how we should go for agroforestry. Generally, people do agroforestry just to have timber, but we say that if we produce fruits, then it will attract more pollinators that will benefit our crops, as well as if we go for soil boosting trees like Professor area, then we will get higher yield in our agriculture farm. So these are the new dimension of agroforestry that we are promoting through familial forestry intervention, and how we should water our trees by making a ring, and we can use that ring to grow additional saplings, like in this picture where we are growing aloe vera without using additional water or land. The same water and land that is used for this tree is producing aloe vera. So these are all native species, and this picture is just to show how rebirth is taking place through familial forestry interventions. This tree was uprooted by college authority in December 2022, and now it is thriving again. And this is a state of public land. Earlier it was degraded by illegal mining, and now it is thriving back. So from withered to thriving. So it's all about familial forestry intervention, through which we are taking smaller steps to make a difference, and at last would like to share some key steps as Henry suggested me. So there are a few key points that I would like to share with you. There are few things that I want to share with you. First is be the change you want to see in the world, as said by Mahatma Gandhi. Means that if you want to see a balanced state of habitat, then you must take step at your own end. Second, restoration activities require selfless dedication and are ongoing process. It's not an event. it's a process, just like life itself. So therefore, if you want to restore any ecosystem, then we must keep this thing in our mind that it's a consistent process. Means that we have to work hard, and consistency is very much required for any successful restoration drive. Third is time, energy, and resources are essential for the restoration activity. So for any good restoration, we need to develop a particular calendar of activities where we should spare some time from our daily routine so that we could do restoration activities without impacting our routine life. Second is energy, and energy comes from our restorational acts. If we expect that anybody will appreciate, then I think that we may get disheartened. So instead of expecting from anybody else, we should focus on our work and try to keep energized from our contribution. And third, resources. Such type of activities actually starts at all level, like I have started from my pocket, and at later stage when you think that now it's a time to take support, then you may take support from your friends, and then you may also approach to the authorities. And the final thing is that on 21st March, we all are going to observe World Forestry Day. So on World Forestry Day, we are also scaling up our initiative, which is our green members at global scale. So I would like to request all of you to take step towards adopting some trees by planting them and associating with your family or your workplaces by declaring them as a green member. And by this small step, we collectively can make a difference. So that's all from my side. So now it's time for questions. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shyam. Really appreciate your talk, and what fantastic photographs from India. It's brilliant to see the work you've done, and the size and the scale of the work that you have done is really, really very, very impressive. We have some questions. So William Dowie asks, so with the society engagement, given that there is different understanding about nature among different communities and also different languages as well, what is your outreach program to try and tell people what you are doing? How do you communicate with new groups of people what you are doing?
Oh, good question. It's really challenging. Still, it's challenging for me because an area where I'm living and I have been working is basically a rural dominated area where people, particularly the women, they actually hesitate to interact with any male. So first thing is that I started engaging my community. So my family. My wife is a co-partner of this initiative, and my elder daughter that is also a part of NPU as a student ambassador of Jani. And my wife and my daughter, they joined me earlier when daughter was younger. Then I always used to go with my wife so that communication could be initiated with female participants. So when they see that I'm coming with my wife, then it's easy to communicate with female participants. This is first thing. And second thing is that there are various local accent or dialects of our local language. So sometimes actually it's hard to communicate in their language, but I try to speak as much as possible in their dialect. So then I easily connect them with the cause. So by going with my family, second thing, by using local dialect, and third thing, by discussing the local aspects. So how they are feeling change in their daily lives. When I talk that earlier there was these type of birds and pollinators, and now they are nowhere. So generally people use ghee, which is prepared from butter, in our daily diet. So now the state of ghee is different from 10 years back or 20 years back. So when I discuss about this change, then they can easily get connected. Yeah, it is changing. And then I explain that why it is changing and how we can stop this change and how we can restore our actual state of biodiversity and how can we improve our ecosystem. Another thing is to club culture with conservational activities. So in India, particularly in Rajasthan, there are a lot of activities that going to take place every day, cultural and religious activities. So I try to make an association with cultural activities and conservational activities. So by which it's easy to make a rapport. So this is all that I have been doing.
Thank you, Shyam. We had another question from Christina O'Loughlin, although you have answered some of her question in your previous answer. But I wanted to ask additionally, how do you persuade people to continue maintaining the work they have done? Once they have signed up and started planting trees, how do you persuade them that it's worth continuing and looking after and doing maintenance to look after the trees and make sure people don't get bored or move on to different things?
The answer is familial forestry. Actually, through familial forestry, when we say that we don't consider them as tree, consider them as their green members. So when people consider them as green member of their family, then actually it makes sense. It develops a kind of bond with them. And we try to plant more and more fruit-bearing trees into the premises of their house boundaries. Fruit trees is a strong stimulator because people are not bothered about the effect of climate change and other things, but they know that now I am planting guava, and after 1 year my family will get guava fruit. So this is a stimulation. One thing, and second thing is that we try to connect with any occasion. For example, in 2017, when my grandmother passed away, we distributed saplings and requested that please grow this sapling. If you, my grandmother was treated, my maternal grandmother was treated just like a village head. So people had a lot of respect for her. So then I asked that if you have a great respect for that lady, then plant this tree and nurture it properly to pay tribute to her. So now last year when I visited her place, then one family offered me grapes and very tasty grapes. Then when I asked that from where you obtained it, then they replied that you gifted a small sapling of grapes, and now this is producing that much amount of grapes, and this all happens because we nurture it as a respect to your grandmother. So then I told him when came back to my family, and I told that grandmother is still alive, so in the form of grapes. So sociology helps me to make such connections. And every time I say that generally we do plantation as an event, we just fix a tree, take a photo, and then forget. I always say that work starts after planting saplings, because if we don't have a dedication, then I always say that then please don't plant saplings if you don't have time or will to nurture it. So every time I say that it's a process which requires consistent action. So this is the way through which I persuade people.
Thank you so much, Shyam. That's fantastic. We are out of time for any more questions, and we're out of time for the webinar. But thank you so much to both of our speakers, to Mark and Shyam, for your fantastic presentations. Thank you to everybody who's attended, and of course, thank you to those who have posted questions in the chat. Our next webinar will be on the 30th of April. It will be at 4 p.m. in British Summer Time, so we are shifting time zones to accommodate the Americas. And our presentations will be all about procurement and working with your suppliers. So the stuff that we're buying into our universities is going to be a really fascinating webinar. We've got two speakers who have worked very closely on this very tricky issue. It will be really interesting. And the link to sign up to that webinar will be coming around when the recording for this webinar is circulated toward the end of this week. Please, thank you very much for attending. Please share your feedback about this webinar. There's a link on the screen and a QR code as well. Please do take some time just quickly to give some feedback about this webinar. Otherwise, thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you so much to everybody who's attended, and for those who asked questions. We hope very much to see you next week, not next week, next month, for next month's webinar. And then otherwise, have a very lovely day. Thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye.